Juno finally seems to be getting more play, but does that mean she's back in the meta? Just last weekend, we saw a ton of Juno in NA Collegiates, which seems to go against the default Lucio Kiri meta that we've been seeing since the dawn of time. So get ready for some really tragic rage axes.
I'm such a fat fucking chud.
The return of Mauga Juno Brig. And whether Juno is truly back in the meta. The first map we'll be looking at is Runasapi, and you might recognise that, despite this being collegiate, 80% of the lobby are OWCS players. To structure this video, I'm gonna use 4 commandments, with each pillar increasing in importance to Juno's viability. Throughput or burst is the first pillar. In fact, looking at the comp from St. Clair's, it looks eerily familiar to what we saw just over a year ago with Juno D.Va. Basically, there was a bug that made D.Va go really fast with ring and boosters and just explode targets. And we do see some version of that here as Red X pops out with the boosters and his speed ring, also known as the Sonic Ring, which allows Tread to immediately fly onto the Wu Yang and explode him. But it's honestly Tread's pathing here that makes a difference. Going to the left side of the wall instead of going down main means he's more unpredictable. In fact, looking at Lucamino's POV, by the time he reacts to the D.Va, it's already too late. Red X in the meantime tries to find an angle with his torpedoes, ultimately just healing up his frontline. You also might be noticing the lack of a tracer on the side of ISU, which, don't worry, I'll cover later. Now, there's more depth on Torpedo Timings than you think. Current rank 6 Juno player, Lau, is the only player in the top 10 who's got Juno in their most played. He did give me a big long paragraph explaining Juno's kits, but for torpedoes there's 3 types. Early fights, mid fights, and poke torpedoes. Early fight is just what we saw. You speed your frontline and swing super high in the air to get a bird's eye view. Really good to do on Runasapi or Circle Royale, maps that Lau directly mentioned. This might look dangerous, pushing forward so aggressively, but that's why you ring your frontline forwards, mostly your D.Va, so they take all the attention. You can see another example here, where Red X speeds his D.Va, pops torpedoes, and gets 6 of them out. Sadly, the downside of early torpedoes is that you can still get traded out by the enemy flanker, like in this case the enemy Echo, but I'll talk about outplaying this in a later pillar to come. Thankfully, poke torpedoes are a lot simpler. You just use them for poke. And as for mid-fight torpedoes, you'll naturally use them when, to put it simply, a lot of shit is going down. In this fight, you can see another early ring plus torpedo push allows Tread on the D.Va to control the right side room. Top down, you can see the 2 angles the D.Va Echo have onto the Hazard Sojourn. So, when St. Clair engage, Red X just about has his torpedoes back to support his frontline. They pair well with the cooldown reduction torpedo perk, which is a nice segue to talk about the perks. On this map, Red X picks Familiar Vitals alongside Liftoff for the major perk. Neither of Juno's minor perks are that great, but it is a little odd that Red X likes picking the faster heal lock-ons compared to getting a shorter cooldown. If you're matching another Juno and one gets all torpedoes back faster, they're probably gonna get their ult faster too, which could be fight winning. As for the major perk, the triple jump is generally better. Lau mentioned to me how important movement is to live, which isn't surprising since you can't just Suzu and TP through a wall. You also technically get a quadruple jump if you unlock the perk after you double jump. But this doesn't mean the blaster perk doesn't get used though. In this map between ISU and Fisher, Admiral on the Juno picked the blaster perk over the jump. As for why, well, firstly, he's playing into Venture Sojourn, characters that are already easy to avoid without a triple jump, as Admiral perfectly does here. He's also playing with a comp that is quite heal hungry, and considering Wu Yang is your only other heal source, the extra throughput from the gun would be quite useful. Generally though, you'll probably be picking the triple jump. Don't get me wrong, the automatic gun is fun to chase down kills with, but it's also fun to not die, and having the extra jump comes in handy for that. Now though, we gotta address the elephant in the room, the balance patch and the bans. As for balance, there's 3 main factors buffing Juno: ult charge, synergies, and flankers. Ult charge is obvious. Juno got a straight up buff, decreasing the cost by 8%, while her biggest competition, Kiriko, got an 8% increase last patch. Basically, there was an over 600 point gap compared to Kiri when it came to farming up ults. Now though, that shrunk to under 200 points. And for clarity, each point corresponds to 1 point of healing or damage. If you're wondering how that looks like in game, you can see that once Redx gets his ultimates, Lucamino is 81% to K-Rush. That would have been just over 87% without the nerf, or just under 93% without the buff. So it's very meaningful, especially considering the Ray is what allows Redx and his team to win the fight, and Lucamino is just 10% off his K-Rush. Shout out to those who also noticed that the point is capped at 67%.
67%! 67, bro!
6-7.
The second balance bit, synergies, mainly refers to the Brig. In other words, if Brig gets buffed, so does Juno, and frankly, Brig's gotten tons of micro buffs over the last few months. Lastly, the recent nerfs to Genji and specifically Tracer make it a lot easier to play Juno. In fact, the times we did see Juno in the past was when Lucio and Tracer were banned, and to be honest, when we see Juno, they still are. Back on Runa Sarpi, Lucio was banned out by ISU, and on New Junk City, St. Clair's then banned Lucio as well as banning the Kiri on Shambali. Swiftly moving to the third pillar though, which is the walk up. Basically, how do you make sure that you aren't playing too far away, that you're not split from your Brig, but not playing too close, that you can just get one shot by the enemy Echo or Hazards? There's two keys here, frontline and distance, which we see in this fight. Now when I say frontline, I'm referring to the D.Va Tracer here. In other words, they need to be applying some kind of pressure to draw attention away, which is what happens as Redx pops the ring to enable their aggression. But this also refers to the enemy frontline, namely the Hazards. If he's holding close and still has leap, Redx needs to respect that and keep the distance, which thankfully he does, avoiding the spikes, popping the ray, and hard punishing Cuffer. But what does it look like if you fuck this up? Well, we get a prime example here. Redx just walks way too early before his Mauga does anything, getting blown up by a railgun and a vortex. Firstly, outmaneuver the ram by just rotating left side, or secondly, wait behind the choke, letting your frontline take more space and draw more attention. It's a bit hard to execute this on Mauga, but that gives me the perfect segue onto the last pillar, the Mauga Juno Brig comp. In case you didn't know, this was pretty much hard meta a year ago and everybody hated it. Sadly, there's two main challenges in the comp. Starting with the ram. The reason this is a bit of an issue is that it stops the Brig from walking up, as it makes it way more risky. You can see Soaks is playing a lot more defensively, marking out the Kiri, but eventually ends up getting caught in the crossfire and dying first. There's not really much else Redx can do, but desperately try and keep his Mauga alive as he inhales all the heals. The only thing you can really do here is to bait the ram form and then push in. Tread tries to do this but kinda gets stuck on the wall sadly. But things get worse on the next points as Redx seemingly gets zoned off by an Echo Kiri while the Brig can't walk up once more because of the ram. This actually looks like a promising bait though. The backline are fairly safe from the Echo Ram and all St. Clair need to do is burn the shit out of the ram from their angles. However, Tread hard engages while his backline's being zoned, meaning that while he catches the Echo, his backline's in Narnia and everybody else goes down. People often think the Mauga comp is a fast comp, and they're not wrong, but the best teams will know how and when to play slow. And this leads me on to the second reason, the growing pains. Just like that one Logic song, people haven't played Mauga since earlier this year, and it was mostly with Lucio Kiri instead of Brig Juno. So there's a lot of bad individual micro plays that slip through the cracks. Just like the Reaper peeking the Soj angle, then wasting Wraith when nobody's chasing him, and then getting caught because he's got no Wraith to escape. The actual 3-2 split from the Brig Sojourn is nice because the Sojourn can get support from the Brig, and it does force the Orbital Ray. If only the Juno Reaper could S-key properly and play slow. Things get even worse as on the next point, we're peeking overclock from one of the best Sojourns in the game. Unsurprisingly, Redx gets dinked and ends up Ajaxing as Ray. Might be a timeout on that one. Again, why we're not playing slow, I don't know. Point hasn't even unlocked yet, so you can just give a bit of space and then Ray the point when it unlocks. There's also that walk-up mistake I mentioned earlier, but even this fight when they've got the points, with both Cage and Ray, they still lose. Lethal opens up the fight once more with the overclock, and while Redx is thankfully playing distance well, his Mauga decides to hard engage with that Cage. The issue is that Redx hasn't got his Ray yet, so when he gets it, it's too little too late. Again, playing just a bit slower here and not pulling the trigger until you get a Ray easily wins this fight. I say all this because I do actually think Juno is back, but not in the way you think. This stuff I've just talked about is the most important factor as to how much we'll see of her. Yes, bans and balance are important to Juno being viable in the first place, but it only gets your foot in the door. As pro coach Capitology said to me, it's still a skill matchup at the end of the day. New Junk City was a skill matchup, and this map, Juno Brig vs Lucio Bap, is also a skill matchup. In short, the Lucio Bap have much better range compared to the Juno Brig, but if you can hold close or path around the Ash Bap Lucio, Juno Brig edges out in value. Listen, Juno's never gonna be back to where she was a year ago, and if she was, I wouldn't be talking about playing slow for ult charge, because she'd already have the ultimate. But if you're good enough, she is back, and she looks pretty balanced to me right now. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe if you enjoyed and click the video on screen too. Until next time.